God's eternal purpose is unpreventable progress, predestined, foreordained. These are things that sometimes can give us a lot of comfort. Marilyn, you've been through a lot of trials in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Sharon, you've been through a lot of trials in your life out there. Randy Little, as you listen to this message, I know you've been through a lot of trials. Nick, all of you out there that listen to us daily. These messages that we were reading here from 1 Samuel, now we're in the 19th chapter, were hard to swallow in that day. Many times the things that happen to us, and even now, you can love someone so much and they can just walk on your face and spit in your face as if they didn't have any conscience at all. And we're going to see in David's life that he had a lot of problems, a lot of trials and tribulation all the time, all the time. Constant something going on. And as we've walked through life, we have these trials. But when you look at a person like David and what happened in his life, and you saw how God brought him through it all. Pain, misery, heartbreak, all of these things. Busted marriages, unfaithful wives. All of this happened to him. And yet, he was a man that loved God and God loved him. His name, David, means beloved. Now we'll go on here with the story. Now Saul told David his son and all his servants to put David to death. David's loving Saul and protecting him and going out and in the battle, like we said in the last one, he brought in 200 foreskins of the Philistines. He killed 200 men. Saul didn't do that. Give him that request. He asked for 100. David always did twice what Saul, much more than what he ever asked of him. I remember a long time ago, I worked for this man, and I was promoted up to where I was making more money than anybody in the company, including the owner. But I earned every dime of it. I ended up doing 5 jobs. Every time somebody quit, he said, "Can you do that for a while?" And I take that job and I do it permanently. All of these people, he was paying all these people, and I was doing all the work now, one man. But I was making a lot of money. And I had a disagreement with them, and I quit. And I went to a series of testing because I had been hurt and I had surgery and things, and they wanted to know what I was at doing. Anyway, the guy didn't believe me that I was doing the testing with, and he asked me what I did, and I told him all the things I did. So he called up the owner of the company and he said, "I want to know something." He said, "Did this man do this job and this job and this job and this job and this job?" He said, "Yeah, he did them all." And he said, "Everything I told him to do, he did it and did more." I couldn't believe it. And he said, "You let him go? What's wrong with you?" The man called me back and offered me untold amounts of money to go back to work for him, and I told him no. I said, when I walked off, I said, "That's the end of the story. I'm not coming back." And I loved that job. Well, David loved his job, and he loved his king. And he did more than what Saul ever asked him to do. Double, triple, faithfulness. Now Saul told Jonathan, his son, and all his servants to put David to death, but Jonathan, Saul's son, greatly delighted in David. And Jonathan told David, saying, Saul, my father, is seeking to put you to death. Now therefore, please be on guard in the morning, and stay in a secret place and hide yourself. I'll go out and stand beside my father in the field, and where you are, and I will speak with my father about you, and if I find out anything, then I shall tell you. Then Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father, and said to him, do not let the king sin against his servant David, since he has not sinned against you. And since his deeds have been very beneficial to you, what would Saul have done without David? What would Saul have done without David? For he took his life in his hands and struck the Philistine, and the Lord brought with great deliverance for all of Israel, and you saw it and rejoiced. And why then would you sin against innocent blood by putting David to death without a cause? And Saul listened to the voice of Jonathan, and Saul vowed, as the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death. Then Jonathan called David, and Jonathan told him all these words, and Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as formerly, as before. Verse number 8 now. And when there was war again, David went out and fought with the Philistines and defeated them with a great slaughter, so that they fled before him. God's eternal purpose is unpreventable progress, foreordained and predestined, as you see. God, nothing can kill you until God is finished with you. Nothing can kill you. You are absolutely invincible until God is finished with you. Now there was an evil spirit sent by the Lord on Saul, and he was sitting in his house with his spear in his hand, and David was playing with a harp in his hand. And Saul tried to pin David to the wall with a spear, but he slipped away out of Saul's presence, so that he struck the spear into the wall, and David fled and escaped that night. Again and again and again, the hate. Have you ever loved someone that just hated you? Have you ever just done the best you could for them, and they just want to pin you to the wall? Yeah. Then Saul sent messengers to David's house to watch him in order to put him to death in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, told him, saying, if you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you will be put to death. So Michal let David down through a window, and he went out and fled and escaped. And Michal took the household idol and laid it on the bed. The household idol. Where in the world did she get the household idol? From her father? The one that was talking to spirits in a manic episode? But put a quilt of goat's hair at its head and covered it with everything, with clothes. And when Saul sent messenger to take David, she said, he's sick. And Saul sent messengers to see David, saying, bring him to me on his bed, that I may put him to death. And when the messengers entered, behold, the household idol was in the bed with a quilt of goat's hair on its head. So Saul said to Michal, why have you deceived me like this? And let my enemy go, so that he has escaped. And Michal said to Saul, he said to me, let me go. Why should I put you to death? In other words, I did it because I was afraid for my life. Now David fled and escaped and came to Samuel at Ramah. Samuel is a prophet, remember? And told him all that Saul had done to him. And he and Samuel went, and they stayed in Naioth. And it was told Saul, saying, behold, David is at Naioth in Ramah. Then Saul sent messengers to take David, but when they saw the company of prophets prophesying with Samuel standing and presiding over them, the Spirit of God came upon the messengers of Saul, and they prophesied. And it was told Saul, and he sent other messengers, and they also prophesied. So Saul sent messengers again, and the third time they also prophesied. God's Spirit is protecting David. God's eternal purpose and his unpreventable progress. Then he himself went to Ramah and came as far as the large well that is in Sukkah, and he asked and said, "Where are Samuel and David?" And someone said, "Behold, they are at Naioth in Ramah." And he proceeded there to Naioth and Ramah, and the Spirit of God came upon him also, and he went along prophesying continually until they came to Naioth and Ramah. And he also stripped off all his clothes, and he too prophesied before Samuel, and lay down naked all day and all that night, and therefore they say, is Saul also among the prophets. God's unpreventable progress. Unpreventable progress and eternal purpose. Then David fled to Naioth to Ramah, and said to Jonathan, "What have I done? What is my iniquity? What have I done? What have I done?" Have you ever asked somebody that you love, "What have I done?" "And what is my sin before your father that he is seeking my life?" And he said to him, "Far from it, you shall not die. Behold, my father does nothing either great or small without disclosing it to me. So why should my father hide this thing from me? It is not so." Yet David vowed again, saying, "Your father knows well that I have found favor in your sight." And he has said, "Do not let Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly, as the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, there is hardly a step between me and death." David was afraid. He's afraid of his master, the one that he loved. He was afraid of the one that he loved. He said, "There's hardly a step between me and death." He had faced Goliath, the monster. He'd overcome thousands of men, but he's afraid of the one that he loves because he's unpredictable. Jacob was afraid of Esau. Not because Esau was stronger, David was strong, or Jacob was stronger. But Esau was wicked. He's deceitful. Then Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you say, I will do it for you." So David said to Jonathan, "Behold, tomorrow is a new moon, and I ought to sit down and eat with the king, but let me go down to eat with the king, but let me go that I may hide myself in the field until the third evening." Now the king, he knows that he's supposed to come. We have a new moon, and we know that David is supposed to be there at the king's table. But if he goes to the king's table, Saul is going to kill him.
Yeah.
"If your father misses me at all, then say, David earnestly asked leave to me to go to Bethlehem, to his city, because it is a yearly sacrifice there for the whole family. And he says, it is good, your servant shall be saved, but if it is very angry, know that he has decided to kill me, decided to do evil. Therefore deal kindly with your servant, for you have brought your servant into a covenant of the Lord with you, but if there is iniquity in me, just put me to death. If there's sin in me, put me to death. Yourself. For why should you bring me to your father?" And Jonathan said, "Far be it from you, for if I should indeed learn that evil has been decided by my father to come upon you, then I will tell you about it." Then David said to Jonathan, "Who will tell me if your father answers you harshly?" And Jonathan said to David, "Come and let us go out into the field." So both of them went out into the field. Then Jonathan said to David, "The Lord, the God of Israel, be witness, when I have sounded out my father about this time tomorrow, on the third day, behold, there is good feeling toward David. Shall I not then send you and make it known to you? If it please my father to do you harm, may the Lord do so to Jonathan and more also, if I do not make it known to you and send you away, so that you may go in safety. And may the Lord be with you, as he has been with my father. And if I am still alive, will you not show me the loving kindness of the Lord, that I may not die? And you shall not cut off your loving kindness from my house forever, not even when the Lord cuts off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth." Jonathan knew that God was going to put David on the throne. Jonathan was supposed to be on the throne after his father, but David was going to be on the throne. And Jonathan conceded to that. He gave him his armor, his sword, his clothing, his royalty. He said, "You are my substitute, and I am happy about it." Then Jonathan said to him, "Tomorrow it's a new moon, and you will be missed, because your seat will be empty. When you have stayed for 3 days, you shall go down quickly and come to the place where you had yourself in the eventful day, and shall remain by the stone Ezel. And I will shoot 3 arrows in the side, as though I shot a target. And behold, I will send a lad, saying, 'Go find the arrows.' If I specifically say to the lad, 'Beyond, behold, the arrows are on the other side of you, get them, and then come for me, so there is safety for you, and no harm shall come to you, as the Lord lives.' But if I say you, 'Behold, the arrows are beyond you, go, for the Lord has sent you away.' As for the agreement of which you and I have spoken, behold, the Lord is between you and me forever." Jonathan said, "Please leave a child, one of my children, alive for our honor. Please leave there one child of mine alive in my memory." And David will do that. As for the agreement which you and I have spoken, behold, the Lord is between you and me forever. So David hid in the field, and when the new moon came, the king sat down to eat food. The king sat in his seat as usual, the seat by the wall, and then Jonathan rose up, and Abner sat down by Saul's side, but David's place was empty. Nevertheless, Saul did not speak anything that day, for he thought that this accident is not clean. In other words, he had touched something wrong. The Jews were very superstitious. If you went out and you touched a dead animal or something dead by accident, you couldn't go in. You were considered unclean. So he figured, well, maybe he's killed a man or something and he's unclean. And it came about the next day, the second day, the new moon, that David's place was empty. So Saul said to Jonathan, his son, "Why has the son of Jesse not come to the meal, either yesterday or today?" And Jonathan then answered to Saul, "David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem. For he said, 'Please let me go, since our family has a sacrifice in the city, and my brother has commanded me to attend. And now, if I found favor in your sight, please let me go away, that I might see to my brothers for the reason he has not come to the table.' Then Saul's anger burned against Jonathan, and he said to him, 'You son of a perverse woman.'" You know what he called him, don't you? S.O.B., that's exactly what he called him. "You son of a perverse woman, rebellious woman. Do I not know that you are choosing the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness? For as long as the son of Jesse lives on this earth, neither you nor your kingdom will ever be established." In other words, you're going to be king, but if he lives, you won't be. Therefore now send and bring him to me, for he must surely die. And Jonathan answered Saul his father and said, Why should he be put to death? What has he done? Then Saul heard the Spirit him to strike him down. So Jonathan knew that his father had decided to put David to death. Then Jonathan rose from the table in fierce anger and did not eat food on the second day of the new moon, for he was grieved over David because his father dishonored him. Now it came about in the morning that Jonathan went out into the field for the appointed time with David, and the little lad was with him. And he said to the lad, Run, find now the arrows which I am about to shoot. As the lad was running, he shot an arrow past him. Then the lad reached the place with the arrow which Jonathan had shot, and Jonathan called for the lad, and he said, It is not the arrow beyond you, is not the arrow beyond you. And Jonathan called after the lad, Hurry, be quick, do not stay. And Jonathan, lad, picked up the arrow and came to the master. But the lad was not aware of anything, only Jonathan and David knew about the matter. Then Jonathan gave the weapons to his lad and said to him, Go and bring them to the city. When the lad was gone, David rose up from the south side and fell on his face to the ground and bowed 3 times, and he kissed each other and wept together. But David more. Jonathan said to David, Go now in safety, inasmuch as we have sworn to each other, in the name of the Lord, saying, It will be between you and me, and between my descendants and your descendants, forever. Then he rose and departed while Jonathan went into the city. A story of love, a story of hate.
Isn't that something?
A story of love and a story of hate. And we've all seen this in our lives, maybe. We've seen it. We've lived it. We lived through it sometimes.
Quite a story.
We lived through it sometimes. These stories here are for our examples, the New Testament says. 1 Corinthians, the 10th chapter. They give us hope and God's assurance that He'll take care of us. And sometimes we don't think He's doing a good enough job, don't we? But He gets the job done one way or another. And as we look at David's life, we look at our own lives. And we thank God for our sustenance. We thank God for the roof over our head. We thank God for His mercy and grace and love, wherein He called us. And Father, use this message for your honor and glory. Touch the hearts of your people. Help them to endure in the time we live in, especially in the time in our country when it's all upside down. Right is wrong and wrong is right. Father, protect each and every one of us wherever we are, and the students all over the world and other countries where right is wrong and wrong is right sometimes. Please forgive me where I failed you. In Jesus' name I pray.